These images you see were published by military analyst Chuck Farah, and these images were verified by Kiev Independent. These are soldiers from Ukraine's 425th Separate Assault Regiment, an elite unit codenamed Skelia. Just hours after the Russians' "We conquered it" announcement, that propaganda victory out an operation at the very spot the Russians claimed to control. And this image, this is the moment the 425th Regiment raised the Ukrainian flag once again atop that building, right in the heart of Russian propaganda. This is not just a building, it is a symbol. This is proof that Putin's 170,000-strong brute force army, that massive pileup, couldn't hold a single strategic building against Ukraine's agile, elite, and determined regiment. Think about it. You have 170,000 soldiers, but you can't defend a building. This is more than a military operation. This is a propaganda failure. As the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, noted on November 2nd, Ukrainian paratroopers like the 425th Regiment are putting up extraordinary defenses in Pokrovsk to disrupt enemy plans. While Putin tries to sell victory to his own people and the world, Ukraine's 425th Regiment took that victory back in seconds and showed the world this humiliation. Isn't this a clear indication of how incompetent the Russian command structure is and how outdated Putin's strategy is? Or what better demonstrates the failure of the brute force strategy against modern, asymmetric warfare? The collapse in Pokrovsk is not limited to this symbolic humiliation on the front line. Perhaps the bigger, more shocking one is happening behind the front lines, in the very heart of the Russian army. And this reveals the painful truth that Putin is trying to hide from the Russian people. Now I will show you an event, an act of rebellion, that may change the course of this war. This is a report and video from the Fire partisan movement in Ukraine. But these partisans are not civilians hiding in the forest. These partisans are Russian soldiers within the Russian army itself. The incident is as follows. Russia's 115th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, a unit previously stationed near Avdiivka in Lastochkina, and which had suffered heavy losses, receives a new order. The order is quite clear: to deploy to Pokrovsk, the very heart of that hell where 170,000 soldiers are concentrated, to participate in suicide attacks. However, one soldier within that brigade, an Atesh agent, knows what this order truly means: certain death. So what does this soldier do? Does he say, "Yes, sir," to his commander and go to his death for Putin's lie of victory? Here's what he does. In this video published by the Kiev Post and NV, we see a Russian military truck with the famous pro-war Z emblem on its door. And the person filming the video is the Russian soldier from that very unit who sets the truck on fire with a flammable substance. Why? Because that truck was the logistics vehicle that would take them to the meat grinder in Pokrovsk. The statement made by the partisan movement clearly summarizes the psychological state within the Russian army. They say, by doing this, the agents are delaying the unit's deployment and saving their own lives. The soldiers see that their commanders are abandoning their personnel to certain death, giving them no opportunity to rest or evacuate. Let's pause for a moment and think. This is the final destination of Putin's army. It shows that the bond between Putin and his own soldiers, the children of the Russian people, has been completely severed. On one side, there is the Kremlin trying to declare victory in Pokrovsk. On the other, there is a Russian soldier who knows he will be sent to his death for that victory, and who burns his own military vehicle, his own army's property, to survive. This is the internal decay of an army and the collapse of trust in the command structure, for it is proof that Putin's Great Russia cause means nothing to the soldier on the front line. And this is not an isolated incident. As mentioned in the same Kiev Post report, a recent investigation by independent Russian media identified over 100 Russian commanders accused of torturing and executing their own soldiers in Ukraine. The reasons? Disobeying orders, refusing to pay part of the injury compensation. Here is the reality of Putin's invincible army, humiliated externally by elite units such as Ukraine's 425th Regiment and internally collapsing due to the rebellion of its own soldiers, such as Fire. So, what does this picture tell Putin? That even his own soldiers don't believe him, that they refuse to die for his lies, and that they sabotage his own army to survive. This is the biggest defeat Putin cannot show the Russian people. So, how was this double collapse? humiliation, and rebellion possible. 170,000 soldiers. That's a huge number. Why can't they control even a single building? Why does a Russian soldier see burning his own truck as a more sensible survival strategy than fighting? The answer lies in the fundamental change in the nature of warfare and Russia's, Putin's 20th century general's inability to adapt to this change. An in-depth analysis published in the Kyiv Post, based on the views of Ukrainian analyst Mykola Bielieskov, clearly illustrates the situation. Russia's war in 2025 is a fiasco. Successes are now measured in acres and hectares, not kilometers, and this Pokrovsk offensive is not a brilliant military strategy, but in Bielieskov's words, the culmination of Russia's efforts to conquer at least something this year. In other words, exactly as we have defined it, a last-minute pre-winter panic. Let's look at the cost of this panic. This is a cost Putin will never disclose to the Russian people. In its November 2nd report, the Institute for the Study of War states that Russia's attacks in Pokrovsk have consumed unsustainable amounts of manpower and material and resulted in high casualty rates. The numbers are even more terrifying. According to a Kyiv Post analysis, Russian losses, dead and wounded, over the last 3 months are at a level of approximately 30,000 soldiers per month. Why is this figure so critical? Because this number is the absolute limit of the monthly human reinforcement that Russia can currently muster and add to its army through shadow mobilization. So, in simple math, Russia is losing every soldier it sends to the front within the same month. This is not a war of attrition. This is a human meat grinder. This situation, combined with the horrific news reported by Charter 97 that Russian military corpses are being stored in a meat processing plant, reveals the value Russia places on its own losses and the logistical nightmare it finds itself in. According to the analysis, the average life expectancy of Russian contract soldiers is stated to be about a month. This is the mathematical proof of why that soldier in the 115th Brigade burned his own truck. Going to Pokrovsk statistically means dying or getting injured within a month, and the Russian soldier, contrary to Putin's propagandists, knows this reality. But the real strategic failure is in technology. Mykola Bielieskov says, this is no longer the battlefield of 2022. Back then, everything revolved around artillery. Now, everything revolves around FPV drones, sensor surveillance, and autonomous systems. The analyst's words are vital to understanding the modern battlefield. In World War I, the neutral zone between the front lines was perhaps a few hundred meters wide, but today it is 15 to 20 kilometers wide on both sides. What does this mean? It means that every tank and armored vehicle moving in that 15 to 20 kilometer death zone is an easy target for FPV UAVs. So, how did Putin's generals find a brilliant solution to this technological nightmare? Their solution was to withdraw the tanks and armored vehicles because they were easy targets, and instead rely primarily on lightly armed, barefoot infantrymen. Picture this. Putin is bringing together 170,000 soldiers but cannot provide them with armored vehicles to protect them, because those vehicles are instantly destroyed by drones. So, he is sending barefoot infantry into the most technologically advanced battlefield of the 21st century using tactics from the 20th century, even the 19th century. We are talking about soldiers trying to advance under the protection of aluminum covers to shield themselves from thermal sensors. This is why the 425th Regiment was able to recapture the City Hall so easily. Russia may have 170,000 soldiers, but the drones and modern tactics. The panic is so great that, according to Charter 97, the Russians are forced to withdraw some of their troops near Pokrovsk, despite having such a large buildup. At the same time, Ukraine is breaking through enemy defenses near Dobropilya. So Russia is not only stuck in Pokrovsk, it is losing ground elsewhere too. Zelensky's announcement that Kupiansk has been completely cleared completes this picture of general collapse. Now we come to the most critical question. What does the Kremlin do when it suffers such a major humiliation on the front lines, when it cannot hold a building with 170,000 soldiers, when it faces a mutiny among its own troops, and when it is strategically forced to resort to barefoot infantry tactics? Will Putin accept this reality and say, "Our strategy has failed, we are retreating"? Of course not. On the contrary, he returns to the classic diplomatic chess table and plays his only real card, namely the nuclear blackmail card. This is a well-rehearsed panic response that the Putin regime resorts to whenever it is cornered. Note the timing. It is too perfect to be a coincidence. Just as this defeat was unfolding in Pokrovsk, as the 425th Regiment raised the Ukrainian flag on the City Hall, on November 5, 2025, Russia's new defense minister, Andrei Belousov, appeared. And do you know what he said? According to a report by Kyiv Independent, Belousov says that Russia must immediately begin preparations for full-scale nuclear tests. Immediately and full-scale. He makes this statement at a Security Council meeting attended by Putin and Chief of General Staff Gerasimov. Of course, they are trying to frame this as a response to the US Minuteman III test. But no one is buying this game. This is an attempt to mask a conventional fiasco, such as failing to capture Pokrovsk, with the threat of a nuclear escalation. This is not a show of force. It is a diplomatic, psychological warfare move against the West in response to losses on the front. This is the highest-level admission of saying, my barefoot army of 170,000 can't win on the front, so I'll threaten to destroy the whole world. And this panic is not limited to the highest level, to Belousov. The propaganda machine is also pressing the same panic button at the same time. Look at this message shared by the X account named nstrike01. Kremlin propagandists are so angry about their failure in Pokrovsk, they claim that their armies, which have failed to capture a city of 50,000 people for 14 months, will strike the coasts of the US, France, and the UK if necessary, with the infamous but arguably even questionable nuclear-armed torpedo Poseidon. See? The pattern is always the same. Fail on the front lines with barefoot infantry, be humiliated at City Hall, have your own soldiers burn their trucks saying, I'm not going to certain death. Then come out and shout, but we have our Poseidon, we'll conduct a nuclear test. This is the clearest picture of the desperation, strategic bankruptcy, and deep panic that Putin and his regime have fallen into. They cannot sell victory to their own people, because even the soldiers on the front lines know that this victory is a deadly lie and are actively rebelling against it. As a result, what we witness today in Pokrovsk is a harbinger of something much bigger than whether a city falls or not. This is the final clash between two different military philosophies. On one side, Putin's 170,000-strong brute force and human wave-based 20th-century Soviet doctrine. On the other side is Ukraine's 21st-century warfare, conducted by elite units such as the 425th Regiment, which is asymmetric, agile, based on UAV technology, and, most importantly, values the lives of its soldiers. And in this war, the brute force strategy has failed. 170,000 soldiers could not even defend a building for propaganda purposes. But more importantly, this shows how Putin's social contract with his own people and his own military is being torn apart on the front lines. Putin promised the Russian people a strong army and guaranteed victory. But the Russian soldier sent to Pokrovsk sees not a strong army, but a meat grinder made up of barefoot infantrymen. He sees not victory, but certain death. And this soldier, rather than believing his commander's lies and Putin's propaganda, rebels against that order. He burns his own truck. This action by the fire partisans is a greater blow to Putin's regime than the flag the 425th Regiment raised on the City Hall. Because it shows that the lie is no longer sustainable, that the truth has seeped into the lowest ranks of the Russian army, and that Putin has lost this war even to his own soldiers. The nuclear threats made by Kremlin Defense Minister Belousov, Section 4, will not change this reality. Let us recall Mykola Bielieskov's important warning. Even World War I ended not with a breakthrough on the front, but with the collapse of systems and states. This double collapse we saw in Pokrovsk, the symbolic and internal collapse of 170,000 soldiers, may be the beginning of the end for Putin's system. Because no system can withstand the rebellion of its own soldiers and such a huge humiliation at the front forever. So, what are your thoughts on this matter? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.